Welcome on into a Thursday night edition of Championship Week, the college basketball preview here on Fox Sports The Gambler. Myself, Joe Tansey, Ryan Coyle, and Mark Henry Jr. live to break down tonight's games and give you a look ahead into the matchups that are on the slate already for tomorrow afternoon. Guys, let's just do a broad kind of overview. We saw two basically elimination games for the NCAA tournament this afternoon. St. John's beat Seton Hall. Pitt beats Wake Forest. So Pitt is still on the bubble. Wake Forest, see you later. They just authored a way to completely bungle an NCAA tournament bid over the last few weeks. And then St. John's feels like they're in now. Seton Hall, I still think, is pretty safe, but St. John's gets a huge win. Now they set the matchup with UConn tomorrow. What were your overall takeaways from those two games? And then on top of that, Richmond and Memphis both losing in their respective conference tournaments. You're good.
Beef?
Go ahead, Mark.
You got it, Mark.
Okay. I'll talk about Richmond going out first there against St. Joe's. It feels like, now that puts it in a situation where the A-10, Richmond's not getting in without the automatic qualifier anyway, but man, like if you're Pitt, you're Texas A&M, you're these teams on the bubble, it's Dayton or bust. If Dayton doesn't win that A-10 tourney, it is a bad situation for the bubble. Good situation for someone who gave out VCU 10-1 to win the A-10 on this pod. As there's probably, I think it was my second favorite conference title future. Now they have to play St. Joe's, and then they're in the conference championship game if they're able to win that one. So big kind of outcome there. And Richmond, me and Joe, and I'm sure Beef as well, we were all we loved Richmond earlier on this year. They had not played nearly as well down the stretch. We kind of saw this coming. I did not think they were going to win that tourney. It's part of why I backed VCU. And it doesn't surprise me, but it's a shame. They were a fun team earlier on in the year.
They were.
Yeah, my main takeaway, I think, is from that St. John's Seton Hall game where I remember last year, Mike Anderson, when he got bounced in the Big East tournament, them showing that stat that St. John's hasn't been to the Big East semi since 2000, and all it takes is 1 year on the job for Rick Pitino, and they're there. Given, most of the time they had to play 2 games to get there, but still, that was an impressive showing. And really, ever since that press conference, the way that team's really turned it around. Their team, I think they're, a 95% lock to be in the tournament as of now, maybe even more. But I don't want to see them in my bracket. I don't want to see Rick Pitino, and they could get like a 10, get like a 2 seed. That kind of remind me of a spot where like Marquette last year was a 2. Then they had to play Michigan State, who was the 7. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, we had such a great year, won the Big East tournament, and then we get bounced before the first weekend's even over. I could see St. John's doing that to a team that had a really good year on the 2 line, maybe like in Arizona or something if they get matched up. But St. John's looking like they're ready for a March run.
St. John's could even be that team that is the 11th seed in Dayton. Mm-hmm. And always that trend where the one at-large team always wins at least one first-round game. They might fit that trend as well.
I think they might be above that Dayton line at this point. I think they might be out of the first 4. But yeah, I mean, you talk about how fast it took Rick Pitino to turn it around. It took him about 15 seconds,
So let's talk about the Big East. I'm ignoring you. I'm ignoring.
I had to. I mean, we were talking about a quick turnaround.
Let's talk about the rest of the Big East tonight, because that's where the bubble conversation is basically staying. You have Providence against Creighton, Villanova against Marquette. Creighton, I got them at 7.5. I got Marquette at 4.5. Full disclosure, I just think those two teams are much better. Creighton is not dealing with the injuries that Marquette is, but I think Creighton handles Providence eventually, and I think Marquette handles Villanova, especially after that dreadful showing against DePaul last night. And the one thing I want to point out with the Marquette-Villanova game, yes, I understand Tyler Kolek is out, but flip it back about a month. Marquette came into the Pavilion without Cam Jones, with some injury issues of their own, and still beat Villanova with basically a 6-man rotation. The coaching, there's a huge gap between Shaka Smart and Kyle Neptune, and Cam Jones and Oso Ighodaro are still 2 very good scorers for Marquette. Oh, by the way, this is a team that won the Big East tournament last year. Yes, I get it. Kolek is still a miss, And when you get to NCAA tournament or maybe even the semifinals tomorrow, it's a big miss. But I don't think it is tonight. Villanova kind of showed their true colors last night. And I don't know how they get up for it tonight. I really don't. And look, they've been moved back to 2 or 3 spots in a lot of bubble projections as well. So do these two bubble teams, I don't think they have a shot tonight. But are you guys any more optimistic about Providence or Villanova?
I think when you look at Providence, I give them a little bit more of a chance because Creighton, that my thing with them is their lack of consistency. And Providence, even without Hopkins, has shown the ability to beat Creighton this year. They beat him 91-87 in overtime. And when you look at Devin Carter in his 2 games this year against Creighton, he's averaging 26.5 points per game. So he's shown the ability to kind of get off on this Creighton defense. And we know that he's going to have to be the superstar that he is to win that game. I kind of like that plus 8.5 number. I think they're going to be able to keep it close. And Creighton, too, if they win the Big East tournament, maybe get a 2 seed. But Providence playing with much more of a desperation angle. So I think Providence has a chance to make some noise and get an upset tonight. But I will say either Providence or Villanova, one of those 2 teams will win tonight. That's my big prediction.
Ooh, okay. I like that. Mark, are you as bold as beef?
I think Villanova is going to win tonight. I think it makes so much sense after how bad they were last night, after how much crap everyone talked about them, the college basketball community, everyone in Philly is going to crap on them, and they deserved it. Last night was a terrible showing against one of the worst teams in the country, but it just feels like a perfect bounce back spot for what a bizarre team this Villanova team has been this season. So I am on Villanova. So I bet Creighton at -7 early this morning. That line has jumped up. I wouldn't bet it probably at 8.5. It was a small play for me at -7. I
got Creighton at 7.5, and I got lucky. Yeah. I just a few minutes ago, I was like, all right, I'll take that. Anything above 8, I think is you switch it to Providence.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet Providence either way, even up to I probably wouldn't bet them up to double digits. You know me on this middle of the Big East, and as I just bet Villanova, but that's more of just like a spot thing. And I do think Coyle being out, I feel like there's almost been a bit of an overreaction to the overreaction, where I feel like they've played pretty well without Coyle. They've definitely hung in games that maybe they shouldn't have, or whatever the case may be, won a couple games. But I think eventually that's going to catch up with you. And I think a game like this, where I don't know what the motivation is, it's to be a 2 instead of a 3. I just think Villanova is going to come in the much more motivated team. On the other end, you could make the same case with Creighton, but Creighton's fully healthy. So I just think Creighton takes care of business.
I appreciate both of you being bold on this because I'm not bold enough. I think Creighton and Marquette are very clearly 2 and 3 behind UConn in the Big East. And I feel like we just need to clear the slop out of the bubble. And having Providence and Villanova in the conversation for another 24 hours is just not fun to me. And look, maybe I'm tainted by watching Villanova last night and being just completely unconvinced by them. But I'll take it. If I'm the idiot here and took Marquette at 4.5, I'm the idiot. That's basically the way I'm going with it, and I really don't care.
I can just see it being, though, like the tip. It's like such a sports story. Like, oh, you almost lose to a winless DePaul, and then you somehow go on a run, and then Kyle Neptune's up cutting down the nets on Saturday night. It's just a typical sports thing. But when you look at it X's and O's basketball wise, they don't look like they belong on the same court that Seton Hall and St. John's played on earlier.
The basketball part is what keeps going back to me. Is like, yes, Villanova, they have to look better than last night. No doubt about that. But the X's and O's, the basketball, the execution, they've played 3 really bad halves in the last 4 halves. A really bad first half against Creighton and an awful game against DePaul last night where they really should have lost that game. I just can't there's enough of a sample size there where I can't shake it. All right, so let's move on now to some other conferences. We've done enough Big East talk. The other bubble team, I think, worth noting, actually 2, maybe 3, depending on what your viewpoint of Ohio State is. Let's talk about Ohio State, Iowa first, because that is a 6:30 tip. I took the over in this game. I think Iowa was going to push the pace, and Ohio State has to keep up. What are your guys' viewpoints? Both teams very much out at this point. Are either of these teams capable of making a run, and do you have a lean in this game?
I love Ohio State. I have Ohio State 36-1 to win the Big Ten. I also have I got them this morning at -1.5. That line's jumped up to 2.5. But I think Ohio State has just been such a better team since Chris Holtmann was fired. Which, by the way, to tie the knot back in, DePaul just hired Chris Holtmann, who
I think that's a good hire, by the way.
I mean, his team is like immediately looked so much better without him. That's what makes it. It's just a tough timing for the hire. Maybe wait until they lose.
Yeah,
because I think they're 5-1 since they fired him, with wins against Nebraska, wins against Michigan State, and I think there was one more in
Purdue.
Yeah, Purdue. Yeah, duh. That's the big. I forgot. I buried the lead there. Forgot the big one. But yeah, Nebraska, Michigan State, Purdue, 3 tourney teams. I knew it was 3 tourney teams.
Well, Michigan State shouldn't be a tourney team, but that's besides the point.
They're really high in Ken Pom. They're like 19th in Ken Pom.
So is Villanova.
I know. It's what makes these weird things. I look at I might be. They might not be 19th. They're up there though. They're higher.
But they are up there, and that's why they're in. Yeah, I get it.
I don't even think I think they're still going to be like an 8-9. Like they're going to be like a 9 seed. They'll get a little extra respect too. A team that if we're just talking like. Non bets. If we're just and I do have a bet in this game. I like the over at 140.5 in Ole Miss Texas A&M. But can you guys explain to me why Texas A&M is like on the bubble? They're 18-13. Like I think the SEC is so overrated. I don't get it.
So I think Texas A&M at this point, they're just perpetually on the bubble. Because wasn't it a few years ago where they were like the controversial team to be left out? I mean, look at their non-con. They beat Iowa State, they beat Ohio State, they beat SMU. Nothing great. Lost to FAU, lost to Virginia, lost to Memphis. I mean, those losses don't look great. They've beaten Tennessee, they've beaten Kentucky. That's kind of propping it up at this point. I do think they win tonight, though. I took them at 5.5. Ole Miss has just been plummeting. They've only won 2 of their last 11 games. I just feel like this is a game where A&M kind of handles business, and they're probably going to lose to Kentucky anyway. But they're one of those teams where it kind of confuses me why they're there. Maybe if they had like 1 or 2 extra terrific wins in SEC play, but I can agree with you, but it just feels like they're the new Syracuse, where we're just perpetually talking about them in bubble season.
Their strength of schedule is very good, though. Their 18th strength of schedule, 20th out of conference strength of schedule, and 54th strength of record. So the committee is really valuing if you go out of your way to schedule games, especially in the non-con. I forget who was like another close team. I want to say maybe it was like Pitt. Was in like the 340 area for strength of schedule in the non-conference. If it comes down to like say one of those 2 teams, I think they might give A&M the nod just because of the way that they scheduled. But that's talking about what they've said in years past.
Yeah, I just don't get it with A&M. Like I've watched them a bunch this year. They're 48th in Ken Pom. They're like 43rd offensively, 50th defensively. Like they kind of like they don't really have a identity, really. Like they're not.
I think there's a drop off in the SEC after probably the top 5. Like the top 4, I think, are in a tier of their own, and you could argue if Auburn is off of that list, that's fine. South Carolina and Florida are kind of that second tier, and then there's a really steep drop off to everybody else in the SEC, and that's. I mean, look, the reason I'm on A&M tonight is because Ole Miss has just looked awful over the last month and a half.
I don't have a take on that, but it's just like. I think my problem with the SEC and why I'm downgrading the A&Ms and these teams in the middle is because I'm probably lower on Auburn than consensus. I'm definitely lower on Alabama's 105th defense than consensus. They're also like 227 since like February 1st. Kentucky, I'm lower on than consensus. They have the 96th defense. Like I'm just I'm not really that sold on the SEC, even at the top. So I struggle a little bit even more with the Texas A&Ms of the world.
I don't think that's a wild take though, because Auburn's got a knock that they haven't really beaten anybody, and Alabama's kind of faded over the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's crazy that Auburn's 5th in Ken Pom and they just don't have a good win.
They're rated above Tennessee.
Yeah, and Tennessee's 7-6 against the quad 1. UNC should absolutely be the 1 seed over Tennessee.
Keep pumping that up.
They beat them.
Keep pumping that up. I got him at plus 750.
At a certain point, the ACC disrespect is going too far. It's not as bad as people. The ACC is not as bad as people want it to be, and the SEC is not as good as people want it to be. That's my
I'll stop you there. Let's get to the ACC because Virginia's in action against Boston College tonight.
Yuck! That I don't endorse. It's not fun. Isn't it fun?
Yes, I agree with you, but that's the talking point in the ACC. I took BC at plus 5.5. Usually, I don't like teams that third game in 3 days against a rested team. I'm actually taking Duke because of that against NC State. So I think Duke is just exponentially better than NC State. But Virginia, this isn't even a fun Virginia team to watch. There's no like big time NBA guy you can fall in love with. There's just nothing there. There's no juice with Virginia. Beef, I'll go to you on this. Like I'm on BC 5.5. I think that spread's way too big. I think BC's shown some really incredible fight over the last 2 days and beat Clemson because of that. But I mean, can we just get Virginia off of the bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either if BC went out and won this outright. I know you're saying that they're playing their third game in 3 days, but they've been playing pretty well down the stretch. Definitely have been improvements under Grant this year from what we've seen. I also think Virginia's just kind of lifeless at the moment. They're right there neck and neck with Villanova, where it's like, we don't want to watch you play. Like if it comes down to, I don't know, at the end of the day, say like New Mexico and Indiana State, give me those two teams over Virginia and Villanova. Give me some more fun offensive teams. But that game's just going to be ugly. 9:30 tip-off in Washington, D.C. too. Is there going to be really anyone in the building after the Duke game? Like I feel like everyone's just going to leave. That's just such an ugly college basketball game. Like the Mountain West games tonight are going to be incredible. I got the UNLV San Diego State one on over my shoulder, but I'll be glued into the Nevada, Colorado State, and then Boise State, New Mexico. Those are going to be awesome.
You want to know a gross game that I'm going to be tied into in about 8 minutes. Niagara and Marist, that Boardwalk Hall in AC.
I actually, you guys are going to judge me, but not be surprised. I actually live bet Niagara against Siena in that super late.
What time was that? 1:15?
Yeah,
basically. I rolled into bed and I flipped that game on because it was the last game of the night. And I'm like, there's no way Niagara's losing a close game to a 3-win MAC team in the super late Atlantic City game. So yeah, Niagara's head coach, by the way, Greg Paulus.
Wow. Marist, so my bizarre bet in this game, Marist team total under 64.5. It's a low number. This is a gross bet. One of the grosser bets I've ever made in my life.
It is, though, a great mascot matchup. The Purple Eagles and the Red Foxes.
Red Foxes. Yeah, you're right.
It's like a Legends of the Hidden Temple matchup.
I'm going to need the Purple Eagles defense. I'm going to be chanting defense for the Purple Eagles against the Red Foxes. Marist has scored under 64 in 7 straight games. When they played earlier in the year, very close games, they scored 62 twice. But both times they scored 62. So I'm going with this trends here. It's a gross bet.
Probably more than Virginia will score tonight.
I wonder what their team total is.
The total of the game is 125, which is,
and they're a 5.5 point favorite, so it's like 64.5, 65.5.
Something along those lines. Yeah, that's going to be a disgusting game. If you guys have anything on Duke, I think they're going to beat NC State pretty handily. This is a kind of, for me, a third in 3 days type thing with NC State. They've also beaten NC State pretty handily this season, just recently, actually 10 days ago by 15 points. And NC State, yes, they beat Syracuse pretty handily, but Louisville gave them some defensive trouble in the first round. I think that their star is going to fade pretty quickly.
I'm interested to see how Duke responds tonight in that first game since the Carolina game, because I feel like they were starting to kind of get into that national title conversation. I know, Mark, you were kind of beating your chest for that one, and then they go out and lay the egg, and this is still a pretty young team. I'm interested to see how they bounce back tonight. Maybe look at like NC State first half spread, whatever that would be, probably like 5 or 6. Maybe they kind of hang around, and Duke starts out a little bit slow, but interested to see how they bounce back, because it looks like most likely it's going to lead to another game between UNC and Duke in the title game. So I'm interested to see how they bounce back tonight. That's going to be telling for me.
That's the title game we deserve, by the way.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. We all want to see Duke UNC, and it's kind of one of the tournament future conferences that I kind of stayed away from just because I think there was no value in it. I do think it's going to end up being those two teams. I have a take with NC State that I always have. I like betting against NC State because I think Kevin Keats is a bad coach. They're about to miss the tournament for the 5th time out of 6 years. I don't know how he's still there. He's in his 7th year. Like it shocks me that he's kept his job. It's not like they've only had one terrible year and they weren't good in 2020, but they just it shocks me that they're just like signing up for mediocrity year after year when you have like such good schools around you. But
Mark, are you familiar with NC State? Like that's just what they do.
Yeah, but at least
they do the same thing in football too.
No.
They win 8 games and go to like the Meineke Car Care Bowl every year.
They win like a resilient 8 or 9 games, though. You feel good about it. Like you don't feel good about their 19-14 basketball season. Like, and I actually feel like they do pretty well recruiting wise in basketball. Like they weirdly will have like draft guys every once in a while or
Turk
like
Smith
transfers. Like Turk Smith, you're exactly right. Like it does feel like they have guys, and they just always like are not even really even on the bubble. Like they're even below that.
DJ Burns is pretty awesome. I'll give
DJ Burns is probably my favorite college basketball player.
Yeah,
the refrigerator with ballerina feet is what we call him.
Dude's I'm looking at Kevin Keats' coaching reference. He was good at UNC Wilmington, I guess, 2015 and 2016. That's some good runs there. Good for him. But I think he stinks as a coach. But Duke, I can't lie. I was pretty disheartened by the way they showed up in that UNC game. I think it'd be hard not to be. Such a big game, and they looked so flat. Their offense kind of like all the things that you thought you could rely on just weren't there. It just felt like they couldn't get those easy shots, and they're such a good shooting team from deep, and they just weren't getting those looks against UNC. But I do think there's a chance we're overreacting to the 2 big results against North Carolina when they're above them in KenPom, like after losing to them twice. So is that right? Maybe not. But
I think they're also in a clear class with UNC above everybody else. And I think that shows these next 2 nights.
Yeah. Yeah, they are one spot above. I was making sure I was okay there. They're one spot above UNC there at 7th in KenPom with UNC at 8th. I do think UNC resume-wise, though, deserves that 4th 1 seed as of right now. I just think the ACC is disrespected.
Let's move on to Big 12. Cincinnati, no shot tonight against Baylor, right?
I didn't bet the game, but I think they have a shot.
That's not okay. Let me do that again. Guys, I bet Baylor -7. Cincinnati has absolutely no shot of continuing this run, right?
I hope you're right. I hope you get good Baylor.
I also took them to win the tournament today. Big 12 tournament.
Big 12 tournament. Yeah, that could always happen. I am out on them when it comes to the big dance, just comparatively to the other teams that are on the 1 and 2 line. Mm-hmm. I was doing a fun exercise comparing teams. And if you look at the 1s and the 2 lines and where they're projected on Lunardi and Palm, besides Baylor, there is not a team that has a unit on offense or defense that is outside of the top 24. Baylor has the 73rd defense, and that's up like 30 spots from where it was a month ago. So good for them. But I think when it comes down to it, they have a unit that's so much worse than the rest of the 1s and the 2s. That's not really to say much on this game. They're better than Cincinnati. Cincinnati is feisty, but I mean, Baylor is the better team for sure.
I watched Cincinnati against West Virginia 2 days ago, and they barely eked that out. And I think you can't take anything from that Kansas win because Kansas is clearly focused on next week. I also think Baylor's never won the Big 12 championship, the Big 12 tournament. They've never won it under Scott Drew. It's always been Kansas, Texas, Iowa State. That's been the last decade of winners. Scott Drew's never won the Big 12 tournament. I think that's a big motivating factor for them as well. And they played close with Houston. They didn't get the job done, but they played close with Houston and Waco. I'd be interested to see that one more time.
We didn't touch on those games, but Big 12, Houston just rolled TCU. They were up 18-0 or something, 16-0. I forget what it was. And then Texas Tech kind of did the same thing to BYU, just ran through BYU. And I watched that game and kind of all the concerns that you have about BYU athletically and up and down, fast-paced transition. Didn't look great against Texas Tech with a team. With
they're a little fraudulent.
Yeah. I think Texas Tech might be a little bit of a sleeper team to watch for.
And I was just starting to buy into Texas too. I was texting my friend last night right around halftime. I was like, I'm starting to finally buy into this Texas team, and then there they go, poop their pants on the spot. In
I
case
am gonna. I think I told you guys this last week. If Texas is in some like toss-up game in the first round of the tournament, I'm just gonna say, well, they have Max Abmas.
I know.
That's literally all I'm gonna say, and throw my hands up and be like, well, he carried Oral Roberts to the Sweet 16.
They're like the anti-Minnesota Vikings a couple years ago, where the Vikings, it was like they were like 11-0 in close games, and it was like, oh, this has to go the other way. Texas has lost every close game they've played in. It feels like every game that's come down to the wire, they've, as Ryan said, pooped their pants. Like they've blown leads, they've came back from behind big, and then kind of blown it at the end. Like they find ways to lose games. I don't think Rodney Terry's a very good coach, but again, they're 20th in offense. Like they're 25th year in Ken Palm. They're right in the mix. And if you're a 1 seed that sees them in the second round as an 8-9 or a 2 that sees them as a 7-10, that's a scary athletic team there with Abmas and Dylan Dizu. I might be saying that wrong. Dizu. I never know.
Yeah.
Dizu. Yeah. Whatever it is. He was big in the tourney last year when they went to they made a deep run and they beat Houston, I believe. I think he was a big part of that.
Yeah. Oh, you guys have anything on Iowa State? I think we should mention K-State within the bubble constraints, just because they're still alive. That doesn't mean much, but I feel like we haven't talked about Iowa State whatsoever in the national conversation. This is kind of maybe an introduction for some people of what TJ Otzelberger, let me try and spit that one out, has built. What are your impressions of Iowa State and potentially winning the Big 12 tournament?
I'm still not all the way in on them. I just don't think that – I mean, maybe the Big 12 tournament if they match up with Houston or something, because stylistically they're pretty much the same. But I just don't buy them to win 6 games in the NCAA tournament just because I don't think they have the scoring. But I wouldn't be surprised if – I know K-State just knocked them off this weekend. We've seen some upsets in this Big 12 tournament thus far. I'm not ruling out K-State winning that one tonight, especially where K-State now pretty much is owning that gym with Kansas out of the tournament. The K-State fans will be out and about. So 7.5, I think that's worth a look. It might be a trap just because they just won on Saturday against Iowa State, but Iowa State's not going to be able to really go shot for shot with Kansas State. So if K-State can get the game moving up and down, I think that they have a chance in this one.
Real quick, let's get into some of tomorrow's games. I know we kind of neglected the Pac-12, but kind of just nobody's going to be watching Utah, Colorado tonight. And look, I'm on Wazoo. They should beat Stanford pretty easily.
We love Wazoo.
I love Miles Rice. I love how they're built. They've got some size. They've got a really good starting 5. I do love Wazoo. I'll say that, and then watch they'll lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Another team I love, South Florida, is in action tomorrow, and I just peeped these lines. I'm on the Bulls. I have 5 futures to win conference tournaments. I swayed against you, Mark. I went with Richmond today. That was obviously a bad decision. So I'm on Baylor, Illinois, Washington State, and South Florida to win their respective conference tournaments. South Florida, look, the motivation's there. You got to win the whole thing to get in. Memphis just getting knocked out is huge. So they have to beat East Carolina and either UAB or Wichita to get into the championship game, whether that be against FAU or Charlotte or whoever. They're 6-point favorite tomorrow. What do you guys think of South Florida?
I'm on South Florida, -6.5 tomorrow. ECU, I faded their offense today, which was dumb. They scored like 1 billion points. It's my only loser so far of the day. But I think that was a lot to do with Tulsa. They looked like they had given up. They actually made a valiant effort and fought back and made it a close game. But their defense was not exactly the most, effort I've ever seen on a basketball court. So I think USF comes back tomorrow and smacks them in the mouth a little bit. So I like USF -6.5. My favorite bet right now for tomorrow that I was looking at was Mississippi State +9.5.
Interesting.
Against Tennessee. Mississippi State has been like they've been pretty good against these top teams. They've at least been competitive. Like they took Kentucky to the wire, lost on a buzzer beater. They took South Carolina to the wire, lost a close one. They beat Tennessee earlier this year. It was at home, but they did beat Tennessee as a slight underdog. I think 10.5 is just. I said 9.5. I'm actually seeing 10.5 now. So I like that even more. I think that's just too many points. I thought this would be like 6.5. So I think that's a lot of points. I think people are drinking the Tennessee Kool-Aid a bit too strong at this point. And I feel like everyone talked so much about Dalton Connect in that game. No one talked about the fact they lost the game. They gave up 85 points and lost the game. I know Dalton Connect dropped, I don't know, was it 40, 39, whatever he had.
They also, what I want to point out with Tennessee is Arizona went through the same thing where they had the 1 seed locked up. So is that just they just lost focus from the Kentucky game? Because Arizona
a game to lose focus on.
It is, but I mean Arizona was different because they were on the road, but Arizona kind of showed up today very easily and killed USC. So maybe we have that in play. I don't know, but I agree with you on the number. It's a little high for me. Before we get out of here, UConn's a 10-point favorite on the Johnnies. UNC opens at 7 against Pittsburgh. Auburn opens at 7.5 against South Carolina, and Purdue opens at 6.5 against Michigan State. Beef, you interested in any of those games?
I think I'm going to look at St. John's first half. I think it's going to be like an awesome environment. They come out swinging, but UConn does what UConn does and just picks up more steam as the game goes on. So maybe St. John's can keep it close to the first half if it's like 4.5, 5. That game goes into halftime like a 2-3 point game, and then UConn kind of takes over in the second half. But before we get out, I want to shout out one team, Kent State, the number 8 seed in the MAC, Toledo now 4 straight years they've won the conference tournament in the regular season, and no NCAA tournaments to show for it. That's pretty insane. I was on the over in that game, and it was the ultimate snooze fest.
We're not talking about that. It's okay.
But yeah, Kent State, good for them, and they're I think a 1.5 point favorite actually tomorrow, or is either a 1.5 point favorite or 1.5.
They are.
Yeah, against Bowling Green as the 8 seed. So we could see some chaos there in the MAC over the next few days.
I've got a gross game for tomorrow to shout out. Another team total that I've been looking at, but Wisconsin Northwestern, which by the way might be the 2 teams that I have pegged like bet against this team in the first round of the tournament. Like I just don't buy either of them, even though Wisconsin did show up today and absolutely like laid it on Maryland. They were up 30 before the ball was tipped. It felt like, but I like the Wisconsin team total over 69.5. They're 4-8. In their last 12 games, so they have not been playing good. Even in that stretch, they have scored 70-plus points in their last 7 games. You look at the total, it's 137.5, 3.5 point favorite. It'll probably be set right around 69.5. So give me Wisconsin team total over.
Nice. Very nice. You're not going to laugh at that? I laughed at your Patino joke.
I didn't even. Oh, man, that's bad
Mark.
by me. I'm slow. I'm still getting, It's not quite March yet. Like I'm not in the turn.
It's March 14th. Don't give me that excuse.
I'm not fully in the mix of things. I'm not, thinking. My mind's out of the gutter over here. I'm thinking numbers. You're throwing 69 jokes out.
We're in the middle of another 16-hour day of college basketball. You got to stay sharp and quick-minded here. All right, so we'll be back Sunday. We will have an extravaganza. Sean Brace will be back. I'm sure he'll be jumping into the mixer as well with our annual Selection Sunday breakdown. Looking for about 7:30, 8 o'clock once all the lines settle. We'll have that for you. For Mark Henry Jr., Ryan Coyle, I am Joe Tansey. Best of luck on your plays tonight and over the weekend, and we will see you on Selection Sunday.